Hi guys, today we are here to talk about heeling. So, in our free Facebook group, we've had a poll going recently about what puppy training topics you guys would like to learn about, and I'm going to hit the top 3. And we're starting with heeling training because this was one of the winners. Now, these are today, we're going to go over my top 3 tips for teaching your puppy how to have good leash manners, how to start that heeling training, all of that stuff. Now, the thing about heeling is it's actually a very complex behavior. It sounds simple, right? All we're doing is teaching our puppies to walk nicely on a leash. It sounds simple, but there's actually a lot more to it. And it's impossible for me to cover all of heeling training and the methods that I use and all the problem solving that we go through in one video. So what I wanted to do today was give you the top 3 tips for teaching leash manners, for teaching heeling, that apply to any method of heeling, because heeling is definitely one of those places where there are as many ways to teach this behavior as there are trainers who teach it, right? There are a million different methods of training your dog to heel. And the thing is that they all work. Okay, they fail when we fail to do these 3 things. So every trainer, off the top of my head, I can think of like 5 different methods for teaching your dog to heel, right? And they do all work, but only when people are following these 3 guidelines. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. So the first one is going to be consistency. And you are going to hear me talk about this throughout this video. If you have been following me for a while, you've heard me talk about consistency before. But the thing about heeling especially is, again, all of those heeling methods work as long as you're being consistent. And consistent means 100% of the time that your puppy is on a leash. Okay, now I don't know about you, but I suck at consistency. I am very, very bad at doing anything 100% of the time. But if we're going to teach our puppies to heel, 100% consistency is what is required. Because every time our puppies step out of heel position and we move forward, every time they pull on the leash and we move forward, we are teaching them to pull. And this is really common with puppies because your little 10-pound, 8-week-old puppy pulling on the leash doesn't seem like a big deal, right? He's not very strong, he's not very big, and it seems like so far away that he's going to need to heel. But then what you do is you set yourself up to struggle because you're teaching your puppy to pull on the leash. So how do we manage to be 100% consistent with our heeling training when, if you're anything like me, 100% consistency is literally never going to happen, right? I am never going to be 100% consistent. Now, in an ideal world, this would mean your puppy is only on a leash when you're wearing your trainer hat and you're thinking about training and you're teaching your puppy to heel. Okay, but we don't all live in an ideal world. I don't think any of us live in an ideal world, right? So if you have to take your puppy on his leash for potty breaks or to the vet or for exercise, then we have to find a way to be consistent. Now, I do this, so this is tip number 2. I do this by using a collar for some things and a harness for others. So this is something I have talked about a little bit throughout our puppy training workshop, which you can find the link to in the description of this video. I have mentioned this before, and then I will make sure that the Freedom Walk link gets in the description of this video. I knew I was forgetting something. I am a huge fan, and this is how I teach all of my students, that when my puppy is wearing a collar, we are heeling. Now, of course, puppies don't know how to heel, and we have to teach them to heel, okay? But when the leash, let me rephrase, when the leash is hooked to their collar, I am wearing my trainer hat, I am teaching my puppy to heel, I am being consistent, I am doing all of the things, okay? When my puppy is wearing a harness, I can be a little bit more relaxed. He can move out of heel position. He can sniff the ground. He can move around more freely. He still can't pull because anytime the leash goes tight, you have got to stop moving. If you move forward on that tight leash, all you are teaching your puppy to do is pull. And it doesn't matter what method you are using to teach heel, it doesn't. If you are not being consistent and sometimes you are moving forward when your puppy pulls and other times you don't, you are absolutely sabotaging your training. So the only thing that I am 100% consistent with across the board is that if the leash goes tight, we don't move forward, regardless of whether they're wearing a harness or a collar. But using a harness for moments when I know I'm not going to be consistent, or we're not training, or, any of those things, it helps my puppy to separate heeling from, polite pet walking. Those sort of categories, right? Now, even when my puppy's on a harness, he's still learning to be polite. He still should be responsive. We're looking for manners. This is not a free-for-all. Okay, but when the harness is on, he gets to be kind of that polite pet that we all think about, who maybe, moves a few feet away in any direction, sniffs freely, all of that stuff. Whereas when they're wearing a collar, we're really working on keeping them in heel position. And this has been a game changer for my online students and for my in-person students. Separating out this casual walk time using a harness versus the heeling training using a collar has been an absolute game changer for my students. So that's like my tip number 2. And I'm a huge fan of harnesses. And when I used to train pet dogs, we used a lot of harnesses then. Okay, so then my third tip is going to be that you have to have proper mechanics and you need to use a marker. And I'm going to show some videos here in a moment. But in order to teach your dog to heel, your mechanics have to be good, and they, of course, have to be consistent. Okay, so mechanics are going to look a little bit different for everybody depending on your physical needs, and that's totally fine. But they do have to be consistent. Now, mechanics are something that I talked about in part 1 of the workshop, and I gave a bunch of examples. You can also learn more about this in our free web class, our Training Skills and Creating Clarity web class, and I'll make sure the link to that ends up in the description of the video as well. And for those of you asking questions, I'll get to your questions at the end, just so you know I'm not ignoring you. I'll get there. But mechanics are a huge thing. So training is a physical skill. And so once you have the physical skill, everything else goes more smoothly. So this is me working with a relatively advanced dog, and we're just practicing some heeling here. But what I want you to watch for are my mechanics. So what I do is I have my treats on my right, my clicker and leash in my left hand, and I click, pause, then get the treat out and reach it over to the side. So that's what I want you to watch for in this video. Now, this is the part that can be customized a little bit. So if you can't do the twisting, that's totally fine. If you can't use a clicker, so you're using a verbal marker, that's fine. There are lots of ways to customize this, but you have to be consistent with them, and you have to keep your treat hand still until after you mark. So the biggest mistake that I see with mechanics are people kind of reaching for their treats before they mark or while they mark. I'm going to use the word click, but it's any marker. And I talked about markers pretty in-depth in our part 1 of the puppy workshop. You can get that link in the description. And I talk about them very in-depth in that free web class, Training Skills and Creating Clarity for Your Dog. That's a 90-minute web class. I'll make sure the link ends up in the video description as well. So when I say mark, or when I say click, know that you can use whatever marker works for you. But you need to click, pause, and then deliver the treat. If you're clicking and delivering the treat, your dog is not listening for the marker. He's watching your hand move. And this makes for very sloppy training, and it slows down your training considerably. So you really need to have nice, clean, proper mechanics when you are training your dog to heel. Now, I do have a bonus tip for you, and this one's going to come with a video as well, and that is to work on one thing at a time. Okay, now this just makes for good training in general. We can only mark for one criteria, so we want to be working on one thing at a time. But heeling actually has lots of criteria. So we want the dog not to move too far ahead or too far behind. We don't want them to get too far off laterally. We want them to keep their butt tucked in. We want the leash to be loose. We want them to increase and decrease their speed as we do. We want them to turn left and right as we do. There's lots and lots of pieces to heeling. And so you really want to work on one thing at a time, especially with a young puppy. So this is Leo. And this is July. He was born in April, I think. So he's about 4 months old in this video, but he'd had almost no training due to that family emergency I had last summer. So he'd had no heeling training to this point, pretty much. He'd been spending a lot of time on a harness and being able to explore more freely. So what I'm doing here is I do have the treats in my hand because I'm clicking and treating so quickly, but I'm still not moving that treat hand until after I click. My mechanics are still the same, and you'll see that Leo is getting lots of treats, right? I am clicking and treating rapidly because I really want him to learn this behavior, and it's very hard. Now, what you'll also notice here is that I am not worried about anything except that the leash stay loose. Okay? I don't care if he's a little too far ahead, a little too far behind. I don't care if his feet come off the ground. I just want that leash loose. Now, for you, maybe keeping the feet on the ground is going to be the first priority, and so maybe you tackle that one first, and that's totally fine. I'm going to play it again so you can see how he starts to improve a little bit over the course of this 40-second clip. I'm looking for one thing at a time, okay? And once he was good at keeping that leash loose, then I could increase my criteria. So even throughout this 40-second clip, I do start to click only when his feet are on the ground. And also, I know he is very skinny in this video. We had taken him to the vet to make sure he was still healthy, and he was eating like 3 cups of food a day. Okay, my point is, I know he's skinny in this video, but we were working with the vet, and he was healthy then, and he's healthy now. But you really don't want to be able to see ribs quite so much. So anyway, you really, really, really want to be working on one thing at a time. So I get a lot of people who go, yeah, the leash was loose, but his butt was too far out, or but he was too far ahead, or but he was too far behind. Great. Which criteria are you working on? Because you can only choose one. And then once that one's good, then you choose the next one. And then when that one's good, then you choose the next one. And you might have to go back and forth. So what's really common is I might do 10 clicks and treats for keeping the leash loose. Then 10 clicks and treats only for being level with my shins. And then maybe we do 10 clicks and treats for not being too far away. But then we have to go back to keeping the leash loose because that one got a little sloppy. And so we kind of bounce back and forth until they all start to overlap. Now, this is what I meant when I said that heeling is a very complex behavior and it is not something that I can give you all in one video. This is something that requires a full course. And of course, I cover this in depth in our online puppy course as well as in our online academy. So we do cover this in depth in there, but it's not something I can cover in depth in this video. But regardless of the training method that you choose, you need to remember these 4 things. You need to be consistent. If you are not consistent, nothing else matters, because a lack of consistency will sabotage your heeling training every single time. Using a collar versus a harness can be a great way to help you with that consistency, to help your puppy understand when he's allowed to move out of heel position and when he needs to stay in heel position, which is something that takes time to learn, but this can really help differentiate that. It protects your heeling training. And there are other ways to, but this is how I teach it. And then proper mechanics and the proper use of a marker are absolutely imperative regardless of the training method that you use, as well as working on one thing at a time. So it really, like I said, it doesn't matter what method you're using to teach a dog to heel. You still have to do these 4 things or find ways to do these 4 things. All right, so like I said, you can find more information on you using a clicker and proper mechanics, which really is like the most important part of training a dog. You'll find about that in our puppy training workshop, which is at the link in the description of this video, as well as that free 90-minute web class on training skills and creating clarity for your dog, and I'll make sure that that ends up in the description of this video as well. And then, we go, if you want to really teach your puppy to heel, we really go into that in our puppy class, which you will be able to find more information about on Friday. If you're here live, you'll get to learn more about that on Friday. And if you're watching the replay, then you can find that information at the link in the description of this video as well. Okay, so I'm going to answer a few questions that popped up in the comments. If you have any questions about this topic, go ahead and throw them into the comments now. And if you have any questions after you're watching the replay, you can ask them here, or you can ask them inside our free Facebook group, Train Your Service Dog with Confidence, as well. And understand that heeling is something that takes time, and that is totally okay. You don't want to rush this. You want to build a nice, solid behavior, and that is something that takes time. Okay, so then we had a few questions. So Caroline asked a question. So she has a 2-year-old who is walking in front of her wheelchair. So I remember that you posted this on one of our other, on the announcement for this, and you had said that he wasn't used to heeling with a wheelchair because he had been taught to heel with somebody not in a wheelchair. And so I think that's important background information. So she says, if I stop, he turns right back around, turns right turns. If I stop, he runs back. Okay, got it. So I feel he knows where to be, but his gait and pace is faster than me. I almost think he forgets I'm there or doesn't understand where I want him to be. He's new as of January, so she's only had him for 7 months now, 8 months. It's August. Okay, so I almost think I need to reteach heel as if he was a puppy. So yes, I would. So here's the thing about teaching our dogs to heel in a wheelchair versus when we're up and walking, and one of the other pitfalls I see with heeling training. So first of all, a dog who has been taught to heel with a trainer on their feet is not automatically going to transfer that to a wheelchair. That has to be taught. So you do have to intentionally now teach your dog to heel next to a chair. Secondly, one of the pitfalls that I see people fall into with heeling training is not practicing speed changes, which is not something I do right away. That's a few weeks into our heeling training. But it is very easy to accidentally teach our dogs that heeling is about walking at a certain speed, not about staying in a certain position. So it sounds to me like your dog understands he shouldn't pull, and that when he does pull, he should get back into heel position. And he also understands that heeling means to move at a certain pace. He does not understand that heeling means to stay right next to the wheelchair. So that needs to be taught intentionally now. There was something else I was going to say, but it wasn't directly related, so it'll come back to me. So anyway, I hope that that's helpful. So then Sherry had a question, and we get this one a lot. My dog will be used for mobility. Should I change to collar for puppy time and harness for working? I still don't. Even if I have a dog who's going to be used for mobility, I still use a harness. So here is why. First of all, your puppy isn't going to be doing mobility work until he's older. Like, he can start learning that somewhere between 12 and 18 months, but he can't do it for real until he's been cleared by your vet and he's fully grown, which is at the age of 2. So you have 2 years to develop a really strong heeling behavior before that's going to become an issue. Secondly, this harness, let me put it up here. That's not it. This harness, a harness like this usually looks very, very different than a harness that is used for mobility work. It looks different, it feels different, and there will be a different set of cues involved. So you will also have, along with the different equipment, you also will probably have verbal cues you're using, other environmental cues you're using, like the leash or the, where you're standing. I mean, there will be other cues. So I still have my students use the harness for, like, not free time, but like casual walking, right? And then the collar for heeling. And then when you are ready to actually get into the mobility harness, the harness is going to look different. It's going to feel different. There will be a different set of cues involved with it. So our dogs are certainly capable of still figuring that out. And like I said, and you probably know this, but I never know who's watching. There's lots of people who watch these videos. So a puppy, again, when we're talking about mobility work, our puppies can't do mobility work until they're older. Anyway, they can start the training, the behaviors when they're sort of 12 to 18 months, but they really can't be doing pulling or bracing or anything like that until they're physically adults. Okay, and then we had a question about Alicia asked about gentle leaders. What are your thoughts on gentle leaders? So I have a whole video on gentle leaders, so I will put that link in the description of this video as well, where I go a little bit more in depth. So I like gentle leaders, but I have a couple things. So first of all, they have to be conditioned appropriately, or they are very stressful and uncomfortable for most of our dogs. So it takes quite a bit of time to teach our dogs to comfortably wear a gentle leader. And for a lot of dogs, I can teach them to heel in the same amount of time it takes me to teach them to wear a gentle leader. But there are a couple of times that I do like them. I like them, one, when we have like perhaps a large unruly dog paired with a small or fragile handler, and we just need to kind of balance that out a little bit. Or I like them for dogs who are very, very sniffy, and I need to manage that sniffing. So I have a dog who's constantly sniffing everything. Then I will put a gentle leader on for heeling training after it's been conditioned properly so that I can manage the sniffing. And then we will move on to actively teaching them not to sniff. So it becomes a management tool. As far as using a gentle leader for heeling, you want to remember that any training tool is just a tool. And you have to combine it with proper training in order to teach your dog to heel. I have worked with handlers who have had who have come into my building whose dogs are pulling on gentle leaders, pulling them on prong collars, pulling them on choke chains, pulling them on shock collars, pulling them on flat. I mean, I have had people come into my office whose dogs are pulling on all the equipment that you could possibly name. And that is because they were not consistent with these other things. They weren't consistent in general. They were making no differentiation between heeling and between more casual time. They usually had terrible mechanics and no use of a marker, and they weren't even hardly doing any training, so we couldn't even get to one thing at a time. So a gentle leader is just like any other tool. If when your dog pulls into it, you move forward, you're going to teach your dog to pull into the gentle leader. You're going to teach your dog to pull into the prong collar. You're going to teach these tools have to be used appropriately or they're not helpful. So I like gentle leaders for specific situations. As long as they're conditioned appropriately and they're being paired with training. So then Sherry asked if you can train a 5-year-old dog to heel. You absolutely can. So you can teach a dog of any age, any behavior they're physically and mentally capable of doing. But the longer their learning history is of pulling or not heeling, the harder it's going to be and the longer it's going to take. So it's possible. It's absolutely possible. But if I have an 8-week-old puppy, I don't have any obstacles in their training to overcome. I don't have an old reinforcement history to overcome. I can just move straight into my training. Whereas with an older dog, it's just going to take longer because we have to overcome all of that other stuff. Okay. And then any other questions? Okay. So then Kat was just talking about using she uses the vest to cue working, and that's working for her, and that's great. And that's a lot of trainers use the vest to cue working, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just find for most people, it's not as clean. Because if the dog is being allowed to pull into the collar, then every time there's tension on the collar, that is a cue that tells your dog to pull. And so then we have a competing cue with the presence of the vest. So it can work, like it's working for Kat, but she's saying she's switching it over also because her dog is overheating sometimes. She's got a very fluffy dog. He's adorable, but he's very fluffy. But she still only leads, the lead gets attached to the collar only for heeling. Nothing else ever, right? So that's really important. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, like I said, if you do have any questions, you can throw them into the comments or you can ask them inside of our free Facebook group, Train Your Service Dog with Confidence. Otherwise, if you have a puppy, I hope that you check out our free puppy training workshop because there is a lot of really great information in there. Part 3 is coming on Friday the 28th. So if you are watching the replay of this video, it may already be there. But we talked about some really important advanced beginning stuff and building a super solid foundation. Then we talked about socialization and how to use that as a platform for public access. And then we've got part 3 coming out on Friday. Cool. Any other questions, let us know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later. Have a good day.